Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give it a couple minutes to let everybody jump on and then we'll get started. All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on what to expect this holiday shopping season. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You're listening in using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the phone, you can just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the question pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and then we will collect those and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Today, we have added an element to the webinar event. We know that many of you used to enjoy the networking aspect of our in-person events pre-COVID, and we want to give you a way to connect in the virtual world. So in the chat box, you will see a link to our post-webinar networking room. Our team also sent the link via email. There's only room for 50 people, so it's first come, first serve. But if you have any questions, you can reach out to Megan in our office, which is just megan@marquette.org. All right, next slide, please. All right, Matt serves as the Vice President of Revitalization Programs at the National Main Street Center. Prior to this role, Dr. Wagner's professional background involves nearly 30 years of nonprofit management and teaching experience in the area of downtown revitalization, entrepreneurship, and economic development. He has served as a leader in the area of community revitalization, directly guiding 2 nationally recognized downtown revitalization efforts. Aside from his professional experience, academically, Dr. Wagner has completed his PhD with a focus on economic development and entrepreneurship. His resume shows he has a long history of program and service delivery in the area of small business development and place management, and we are so thrilled to have him speak on the webinar today. Thank you for Dr. Wagner, and I will hand it over to you.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm on Central Time, and I think everyone else is on Eastern Time, but I think we're all still in the morning phase. I want to thank the Lake County Community or Lake Superior Community Partnership for inviting me today to really talk about what I think is an incredibly important topic for us at this time. Not only is it just generally throughout the years, we know that the holiday shopping season is one that's incredibly important to retailers all across the country, especially our small mom and pop independent business owners. But COVID, the global pandemic is really highlighted the critical nature, especially this year, given shutdown orders and closures to reopen to, in some cases, depending on where you're at in the country, additional closures. And so for that standpoint, COVID's really impacted sort of the shopping dynamics that we normally might anticipate from, local consumers, those looking forward to the holidays. And so, my remarks are sort of an agglomeration of a lot of different trends that are happening because of COVID, and some of the early signs of what we should anticipate with holiday shopping this year. So while I don't have a crystal ball, I hope that you'll find that while there is certainly a lot of challenges and sort of headwinds that many of our retailers and restaurants are facing, this particular winter and holiday shopping season, I think there's also a lot of reason to be optimistic and hopeful as we enter the traditional holiday shopping season. So with that, I think it's important to just understand that that this year will certainly be unlike any other, and I think that's probably the most obvious statement that I'll make this morning in my comments. You know, people's habits have definitely changed. Now, can people adapt new habits? For sure. But I think for right now, it's important to note because of the length that we've all been sort of under this COVID cloud, you know, things like stay-at-home orders to social distancing to mask wearing or not. It just depends on, you know, where you're at and sort of what your flavor is. But we've definitely developed new shopping patterns and habits and grown to expect certain things as a result. Um, Also, just in general, consumers, depending on what spectrum you may fall, might be more hesitant because of general health concerns or what have you. And so um, that habit formation ranges quite dramatically. And as such, you know, these COVID-related impacts have really led to other kinds of shifts, not just within shopping, but certainly in how we work with, you know, so much more remote at home. Our kids are at home many times, and again, depending on where you're at, learning from home versus in a school setting. How we recreate or our desire to recreate maybe more outside has definitely shifted. And so as a result, I think we can anticipate some new kinds of patterns during the holiday shopping season. Next slide. All right. So what I wanted to point out is, again, sometimes, you know, with especially in the media, we tend to look at things are tended to look at more nationally in scope. And so, you know, again, most of my remarks are going to be sort of from a national, more macro perspective, but I would certainly encourage you to engage at the local, the hyper local level, because some things may be very relative towards your local consumers, and some might be a little bit off. And one of those is actually just in terms of more macro numbers has been in the media forecasting around retail sales. And so if you were just to look at sort of the headlines, you would you know come away with the thought that retail overall, in essence in all sectors, has been highly impacted. And you know the storylines really, if you dig down deeper, don't necessarily reflect that. Okay. Certainly, retail sales for bricks and mortar, especially national chains, have been dramatically impacted in 2020. In 2019, we were already seeing things really sort of downturns in apparel and shoe sales and department store sales, for instance. And that has largely continued. And so most of the bankruptcy filings and closures have been more at the national chain level relative to those particular sectors. In addition, just overall retail sales, while not great, actually are up. Okay, but that's largely driven by because of e-commerce versus the bricks and mortar component of retail sales. And so that's why I indicate you sort of have to dive down a little bit deeper here. Now, bricks and mortar is making a comeback. Certainly, we saw in May and June and into July some really strong bricks and mortar retail sales returns that took a little bit, you know, dive into the e-commerce component that's now slowly starting to come back to perhaps a little bit more normalcy levels or pre-COVID levels, but will probably remain still a little bit higher. The concern probably is now getting into the fall. We've seen a little bit of stagnation in overall, or I should say bricks and mortar overall retail sales that have largely been flat. I think September was about 0.6%, and August was pretty much in line with that. So I think the rosier, more robust return of traditional bricks and mortar retail sales is still a little challenged at this point. until, perhaps the good news that we saw yesterday around the vaccine, and where people have a little bit more confidence about their own health, and going into sort of a store, restaurant, those kinds of things. The other big area I want to mention is that while there is certainly downturn in the retail, in some sectors of the retail, and as you can see here, based on some August retail sales, certainly in restaurants, although restaurants did perform very well in the summer because of outdoor dining opportunities. Certainly gas stations, because a lot of people might not be driving to work as much, or to school, or what have you. And then apparel sales, which is really just a deeper acceleration of what was already occurring pre-COVID. So by understanding this gives us some insight as to also what we might expect from, in terms of just overall retail sales categories that might flourish, do better from a holiday shopping perspective. And so you see here that things like building materials and sporting goods, recreation, food and drink at home versus away from home, those kinds of things have, during the pandemic, have actually done very, very well. Okay. So next slide. So some of the headwinds that we see relative that might in retail sales that might actually impact the holiday shopping season is, again, sort of the unemployment figures, that while unemployment continues, we still see each week on Thursday, if you watch the news, you will see the weekly unemployment filing reports, although some jobs are obviously coming back as well. So that's been a little bit more on the coming back than the new unemployment filings, but still, weird level, like nowhere, in terms of, like the Great Recession comparisons, that sort of thing. It's still about 8% unemployment rate. The other interesting part is just looking at personal savings rates, and I think that's really the critical point here. That when personal savings rates are still well above the sort of pre-COVID norms, that suggests that people are hoarding a little bit more cash, still a little bit nervous about what's happening. And so, we're paying down credit, which is good. We're hoarding cash, which can be good, but that doesn't, in a consumer-driven economy, that's not always helpful as we think about the holiday shopping season. Next slide. Okay. As I mentioned before, there's a number of sort of new norms that we're all picking up on during this particular time, and I thought this survey that was done by Accenture during the summer really suggests that some of the common things that we've seen in our downtowns all across the country is small businesses that begin to adapt to some of the challenges that we experienced and are experiencing in COVID, things like home delivery or curbside pickup, or doing a lot more in terms of social media, and creating that engagement with their local customers, or their tourism customers. That those things are likely to remain pretty sticky. Even so, in a post-COVID situation, you see here that people still expect, if you've been using that, so in essence, that's become part of your new normalcy of shopping, that's likely to remain pretty relevant going forward. So as we think about the holiday shopping season, and the snow, especially in your neck of the woods, right? And I'm in Milwaukee, so we have the same sort of issues, is dealing with, allowing for the streets and that sort of thing to allow for continuous, pickup, delivery, stop, go, that sort of thing as we move forward. Next slide. All right. So as I mentioned before, I think there's some areas, it's always hard during the holiday shopping season. You probably see the articles that are being written around like the hot new things that people will be buying during this season. I won't go that deep. I don't think I have enough expertise to gauge what those hot products may be. But I do think that from what we're seeing, what we can anticipate is there's sort of some groupings of products. So if you're in that particular realm, that's very hopeful. That's not to say there's not others, of course, but I think there's a couple areas that are ripe to do pretty well during the holiday shopping season. And one of those is anything having to do with health and recreation. So whether it's bike stores or health food stores or what have you, that anything that's sort of closely aligned with these particular sectors, I think are looking pretty good for this year. Certainly, we've seen a lot of increased use of getting out on trail systems, even from a tourism perspective, even though we weren't like flying to different places. If you could drive to a rural location and get out in nature, enjoy parks, enjoy hiking or biking along a lake, what have you, or kayaking. So these were really large drivers during the summer and into the fall months. And you can see some sales data that I put up. Bike sales were just through the absolute roof. And what's interesting is that a lot of that were people new to that particular market. So like leisure bike sales, electric bike sales, people that might not have been within that area. So again, I think we can pretty safely be assured that these will be areas of continuous interest for a lot of consumers, and thus in holiday shopping, they're likely to pursue more purchases in this particular area. Next slide. Another area I think that's pretty ripe that we're going to see is anything that's related to cooking or food related, food prepared at home per se. Some of the areas that give us some indication of this is just obviously the big one is how much we've shifted from food away from home to food at home. So in 2019 was actually the first year where food away from home was a stronger category than food at home. And what we saw then, after basically March 2020 was a total reversal of what had been a growing trend towards that period. But that's not to say that people won't still engage in restaurant activity. It may be slightly different. Again, we need to continue to do delivery pickup. I think there's some great opportunities we'll discuss in a little bit in terms of just winter activation around the restaurant sector. And I think many restaurants have also begun to look at sort of business model pivots, things like doing more prepared foods and having those available so that you can then make them at home and share that special recipe from the chef or what you were used to before. So I think there's still a lot of engagement opportunities there because while we're cooking more at home, especially around the holidays, I think we can anticipate that people might want to do less cooking, but still have their celebrations at home versus perhaps going out. And you'll see that in some additional data coming up. Some of the other areas, anything to do with looking forward to the spring, late spring, obviously where we all live, growing season. This year was huge for that, and I think anything associated with gardening will be another winner during the holiday season, sort of gearing up and looking forward to that as we've developed some new habits. And anything relative to cooking accessories, gadgets, appliances. If you've seen the whole Instapot craze, I will admit I bought one of those. The 9-in-1, the 11-in-1, the 7-in-1 cook all is a big thing again as we've moved to doing more at home and trying to make those experiences more pleasing, I guess you could say. So anything for cooking, food related, I think is going to be pretty strong in 2020. Next slide. Sort of on the dovetailing, sort of the more micro segment of cooking at home, doing things at home, is more the macro of anything at home. And so what we've seen with more remote work, which actually is getting a lot of headlines and for good reason during the COVID situation, However, this was something that was picking up steam well before we even knew anything about COVID. So over the last 5 years, it's grown 44%, and over the past 10 years, it's increased 91%. And so there's just a bunch of new workforce that's been moving in that direction, and all indications would suggest that many of the folks that have moved to remote work that perhaps weren't at that time will have some form of kind of stickiness there post COVID. And so as a result, again, as we look more inward at the home, as we're spending more time at the home, and certainly in the near term, as kids might be spending, or families might be spending more time at the home, that suggests that you want to make things better, that you're spotting all the challenges at being at home and things not working quite right or looking quite right. And thus, I think we should anticipate that if you're in the home furnishings area, furniture, decor, interior design, home improvement services, electronics, that these are all areas that should be good performers during the holiday shopping season. So again, entertainment, electronics. We're also seeing some crossover in terms of like home fitness. So that recreation market that I mentioned before, turning inwards as well as at home and becoming what we call gamified. So if you've probably seen commercials for like Peloton and Nordic Track, and so you're sort of outdoors and you're competing with others and joining in with others, all from the confines of your home. So there's definitely some more inward looking in that result. Also in the home office, I still haven't figured mine out here, but we're seeing like shed sales, for example, that are up 400% in 2020 as people are looking for any place they can get some quiet space and transition a room or what have you to a home office. Home tech, you see furniture, things around the home are really up. As Herman Miller is showing dramatic sales in home office kinds of furniture, chairs, that sort of thing. So again, I think this is an area that's pretty ripe. Go ahead, next slide. I think finally, just in terms of kind of an overall product category, is I'm going to kind of combine this into a pretty broad one. But I think anything that's sort of can be localized, that was made locally, grown locally, that's experiential, or says something about one's lifestyle, is going to be pretty hot this season. People have been in their homes and maybe doing a lot of online shopping, but the online environment is not very conducive to the experiential. It's hard to think about really unique items that speak to your particular lifestyle. And that's been an area that many downtowns across the country have really built up success and has really sparked that revitalization over the past decade, is because consumerism has moved into that particular direction and sort of split between price convenience and value add experiential. It's been those two sort of ends of the spectrum. And so e-commerce has kind of been in that convenience price sensitivity, more volume kind of products to downtowns and urban commercial districts, smaller towns that have been able really to leverage the other part. And so some recent survey data that's come out from Accenture suggests that 56% of consumers are looking to shop locally. And I think that's really good, and buy locally produced or sourced kinds of products. And they expect that this is going to be something that continues into the long run. I think there's a lot of bent up sort of demand there. Just overall, sort of anecdotally too, I think we're seeing that people are very concerned about what's happening with small businesses all across the country, and not wanting to see a society or their communities strictly be sort of Amazoned, or big boxed out. So I think this is really critical as people think about their own identity, their own communities, and recognizing that small businesses really craft that identity, craft that sort of brand that uniqueness within one's community. So I think we can't and shouldn't underestimate that yearning that people still have. Now, that doesn't mean it's not challenged by still having perhaps access to e-commerce, access to delivery pickup, because health may outweigh some of that interest. But if we've got that, I think that bodes well going into the future as well as into the holiday shopping season. Some of the reasons around that is that really they're in this quest for authentic or artisan products, and I think it's really sort of telling that if you look at Etsy, which is an online platform, okay, so this is an e-commerce statistic, but I think it's a really interesting kind of litmus test for this experiential lifestyle shopping yearning and demand that's out there. So when people couldn't perhaps go to stores to find this, they turned to places like Etsy that feature artisans, crafters, makers. Of about 50% of those particular vendors on that site are bricks and mortar. They're independent store owners that use Etsy as their selling platform outside of their local communities. And what they found was that sales were up 137% over 2019. So I think that suggests, which is far outpacing regular normal e-commerce sales that increased during COVID, that this is certainly an area that people have a lot of interest. Okay, so if you're not familiar with that kind of shopping, I placed on here, I think one of the a great example that I got to see firsthand. This is in South Boston, Virginia. This is a florist that's created what she calls the flower bar. And so the experience here is that you get to choose your own vase. You get to choose from a sample of different flowers. You get to like make it yourself. And so it's very highly unique. It's very detailed to the particular consumer or to the individual that consumer is buying the gift for. And it allows them to make something themselves. That's kind of the experience part. Whether you're being educated, you're telling a story, you're able to participate, you're able to watch someone make something. That's really part of this sort of key drivers as we look towards the future, but also as we think about holiday shopping. Next slide. All right. So I think some other areas where we can look towards to better understand how consumers might react to holiday shopping is frankly to look at the big nationals that have a lot of marketing capacity. They've got a lot of market research capacity. And so looking at what they're doing can also be sort of an interesting way to view how mom and pops, independents might also need to sort of pivot during this very unique and challenging holiday shopping 2020. And so, just looking at some, if you've sort of read again the sort of the newspapers, been into one of the big boxes, what you know is that the holiday shopping season has started even more early than in prior years. I mean, I think we used to joke that around Black Friday, and then it was creeping into early, or mid-November to early November. And this year, it actually started in mid-October. Like we're already almost a month past where Amazon and Walmart began to kick off some of their early shopping days for the holidays. Okay. And in fact, in November alone, Walmart, for example, is having 6 Black Friday sales dates, ranging from the 4th to November 27th. So you shouldn't really anticipate the traditional Black Friday is really being expanded to multiple events versus just one event. And Amazon is sort of following a pattern here. Target doing some similar things. They've also developed a rather unique kind of appointment shopping reservation online that you can go to, and they're doing special hours for at-risk groups. But if you're not one that wants to stand in a line, you can actually go online to Target, and it will show you your local store, how long the line is. Do you want to put an appointment or reservation to hold your place in line? And then it will send you an alert, and you can then go. And once it's about ready to go in, you can then be there and not really have to wait in line. So very interesting how they're using technology. But I think the takeaway for all of us that are working with small businesses, or if you're a small business owner, is to think again longer term, that we're starting already. The clock's started ticking. It doesn't start with Thanksgiving this year as maybe traditionally as we thought. I think what's also critical is that people are already spending dollars. So the longer that we wait, because of these sales and that sort of thing, there may be less dollars available for as we get closer, unless you're like me that constantly just waits and till the very last minute. Okay. Obviously, we form new habits, and I think that has to remain sticky as part of our offering, so to speak. And then if you're a small business, I think it's just going to be even more important to be strategic with inventory purchases. Trying to forecast what categories, what products are going to be in demand this year, because there is some struggling with timing on inventory deliveries. There may be vendors that just aren't as up to speed, or there may be flow issues if products are coming from overseas or for other parts of the country in terms of the timing around delivery. So we have to forecast a little bit more as well. And frankly, cash on hand may be a challenge. PPP is probably gone through now, or EIDL if you were able to get one of those grants. And so, cash could be a challenge. And so I think that just all that suggests is that we have to be even more strategic and better think a little bit further ahead as well, just in terms of timing on inventory. Next slide. All right, so sort of up and down, some challenges, some I think lots of opportunities. The good news is that almost every forecast I've seen relative to the overall spend, what consumers are looking to spend for the holidays. And again, this can be a little bit off, but I've looked at a number of them, and they all pretty much fall in line that while there won't be a great increase in holiday shopping sales, they are anticipated to be at least flat compared to 2019. And 2019 was a very good year, and so I think that bodes well. That there's still a lot of sort of consumer confidence or interest in shopping, and so I think that's good overall. However, I think it's important to note that there is some shifting in that. So if the pie is this in terms of overall shopping, the kinds of things that they're spending money on relative to the holidays has shifted a little bit, okay? And the biggest area is where they're doing some of the sort of socializing around sort of that kind of spend, going out, maybe meeting up with friends or family, or even traveling in some cases away from home to visit. That's going to be where we see the biggest drop off. Okay, so that spend is projected. This is out of Inc. magazine, and again, this is pretty characteristic of a lot of other agglomerated research that's out there. That you can expect between 25 and 30% and 35% drop off in that particular area. Entertainment at home is relatively flat. Gift card business is a little bit down, but not off much. So the biggest area is that socializing. And so where we're seeing that shift is more towards the home. So like home holiday furnishings, doing things around the home, or non-gift kinds of items for the home is probably where we're seeing the biggest shift. So just think of it as going away from the home, much like we saw with food. That's how we'll see some of the holiday shopping shift as well. Next slide. All right. So in terms of what consumers are thinking, and I've alluded to a little bit of, so I won't dwell on this too much, but two larger sort of powerhouse commerce groups, Google and Radial, did surveys specifically focused on how consumers might react this year to holiday shopping. And so without a doubt, there's still that demand curve that will be there for e-commerce, okay? However, there is still that drive towards local. It's sort of this push-pull between e-commerce and local. And again, e-commerce will probably be for more the price sensitive, the convenience, the sales, that sort of thing. I think when it falls in line with tradition and experiential lifestyle, that wanting that value system of wanting to support local, that's where we'll see the drive towards local shopping. But you can see that there'll be more of an elongation of the shopping season, okay, and fewer trips, okay, less exposure, one might say, to potentially, COVID, that sort of thing. Next slide. So I want to transition now to, okay, that's sort of what the data is telling us. How as we as, sort of local community leaders, small businesses, how might we think about sort of transitions or different ideas to pursue as a result of what the data is projecting, okay? And again, I would encourage all of you, even at the anecdotal level or qualitative level, if you can't do a survey, that kind of thing, is have that discussion, better understand how local consumers might react during this particular season, or take some of these ideas and see how they mesh at the hyper local level. For the first one, I would suggest is that sales are great and from a marketing ploy on an e-commerce platform. They don't work as well in this particular season, I think, at the bricks and mortar level. I think in this particular case is we're leading with clean and safe. That most of the data that we're picking up on still suggests that consumers may remain reluctant during this time. And so while it doesn't have to be an in-your-face, anything that you can visually showcase, whether it's employees cleaning, showing hand sanitizer at the front door, or placards, signage, what have you, that's going to go a long way in just making people feel more comfortable as you go through. So I think that's really sort of the pivot from a marketing perspective. Also, for local communities, you might want to think about having that dialogue right away with your small businesses. How are they thinking about their particular holiday shopping season, what they're going to be offering? Are they doing anything special from an hour perspective? Kind of assessing what their plans are, sharing consumer data with them, like presented here or other forums that you find. Are they actively engaging or beginning to pivot from an e-commerce perspective? Again, that doesn't have to be an overwhelming portion of their business, but if they're not online, if they're then, and again, that doesn't have to mean that they have a full-blown shopping cart, but if they're not engaged in social media or having a presence online, that's going to be a real tough challenge for those businesses that haven't begun to pivot that. The concern we had early on was back in April when we surveyed close to 8,000 small business owners from across the U.S. Almost 2/3 of those small business owners did not have an e-commerce component to their business. Now, I think a lot of people have been preaching that over the past 6-7 months, and so the hope is that many of them have transitioned in that. I think the other thing that we should do is follow a little bit of the leads of like Target, but also what grocery stores were during this time, and think about like niche opportunities where you can elongate store hours. Think about special store hours, whether in the morning or in the evenings during this particular time. And it doesn't have to be every day. It could be on Friday, we're going to do special hours for seniors or some other group that's important to your particular business. You can treat it as sort of a VIP private shopping opportunity. But I think we need to give people those opportunities to think about shopping that they're yearning to do outside, but with social distancing, with a lot less people than perhaps what we saw in previous year, where mobs of people are going into a particular store. Anything that we can do in terms of providing outdoor holiday shopping experiences. Again, we were seeing this in the summer and the fall, people wanting to be outside. Even though it's cold and maybe snowy, I think tradition is something that's sellable this year, and so people might be willing to be outside a little bit more. And obviously, where you guys are at, people are pretty hardy And so I think that holiday outdoor shopping experience will allow us to, have a little bit more people, whether that's having parklets, taking up parking stalls, bringing product out, so people can, manage through. I think is a way to go. And there's a lot of really good resources out there that I want to mention. If we can go to the next slide. So your own state of Michigan, the Michigan Main Street program just put out their winter strategies for downtowns and business districts. I had a chance to look at it. It's a fantastic guide. So not only is this great for the holiday shopping, but if we think about the whole winter outdoor activation, start gearing up now. And maybe we can also get some then further demand after the holiday shopping season, when traditionally January and February might be tough months. I think with winter activation, we can really spur a lot of interest through that. So there's a link that's built in here, but you can also just go to miplace.org, look up Michigan Main Street, and you'll see not only these kinds of resources, but a lot of other sort of COVID-related resources, downtown revitalization resources. So whether you're small business, community organizations, strongly encourage you to check these resources out as you think about your own winter activation strategies. Next slide. Some other really good resources is for winter activation, holiday shopping kind of activation. There was a great winter places design guide that was just put out. It came out on October 26th. It's free. You can download it as well, just much like the Michigan resources. And this was a more of a kind of a crowdsourced document. So you can check that out. Hennepin County, which is Minneapolis area, also put out sort of this relationship between winter activation and economic development, and you can down that. They kind of have a toolkit associated with that. So just really tremendous resources if you're interested in sort of how to activate more space. Next slide. Just want to mention what some other communities are doing across the U.S. I would strongly, again, sort of encourage to take a look. If you're interested, you can go to our website. We're trying to feature as many of these as possible. The greatest form of flattery, obviously, is copying great ideas. And I think the wonderful thing about the Main Street Network all across the country and in Michigan is the ability to just kind of share resources and look at examples. So this is just an e-gift card program. This is actually out of Morgan Park, Beverly, in a neighborhood in Chicago that's doing this. It's all sort of app driven. The nice thing is a lot of these things are now off the shelf platforms that can be done for local communities at extremely low cost. Next slide. There's also holiday decorating. I think this is another area that people are really yearning for. So create a contest, showcase it in storefronts. It allows people to even drive by to see these things if they're sort of nervous around walking around or something along those lines. So I think, again, if we can bring that spirit back to our downtowns, back to our small businesses, I think that's a winning formula this year. Next slide. The other kind of interesting thing, again, is people are trying to figure out about social distancing in some cases. Are these sort of drive-through or reverse parades? I mean, it's been a shame that so many parades have had to be canceled this year. And, the one that especially a lot of little kids look forward to are those, the holiday parades and seeing Santa. So some groups have really gotten creative about having the parade be stationary and allowing you to sort of drive through. And I think I have a video on the next slide that you can see of one. This is in Hollister, California, if we want to go to the next slide. You may not be able to hear the sound, but this is a commercial they put out, and essentially they're holding it at the airport, and all the parade floats are there, and you get to drive around it. So the parade's not moving, you're moving. You can still see the holiday lights and all the different floats, and you can see Santa, et cetera. And so it's just kind of a unique sort of view, or sort of a COVID view of the traditional parade, but done in reverse. So very, very, very clever. Next slide. Some other ideas I just want to share with you before I conclude my remarks. Um, Anything that you can do to help out your small businesses relative to delivery and pickup, I think is going to be extremely important that we're able to maintain that. In the old days, we did a lot of co-op advertising amongst our business owners, and so the potential to do that with some sort of co-op delivery pickup system, I think, would be really advantageous if that's a sort of barrier to any of your small businesses because of cost expense. The other thing is anything we can do to maintain some sort of outdoor dining, even in the cold. The Europeans are pretty good at it, but I know this can also be expensive. And I think this can be another area that through some co-op between amongst a number of businesses and local organizations to buy outdoor heating lamps, create a parklet or a special area in the downtown where people can congregate with taking their food to their picnic tables and having that experience, still maintaining social distancing. I think that'll be a really unique experience that people are looking forward to. We know that just in terms of summer outdoor dining, that was through the roof. So I think there's a lot of demand there. And then finally, just in terms of pivoting grant funds, if there's any remaining, I would just keep them as loose and general and flexible as possible as we go forward. It's hard going into the shopping season to know where those needs might be. It might be in inventory purchases, or ways to reconfigure their store during the holidays or decorate during the holidays, or market expenses. So if you do have grant funds, rather than really hone in and narrow, I would keep them rather flexible and help as many businesses as possible. Next slide. All right, so I'll just conclude my remarks with where I think, frankly, going into a holiday shopping season, again, amongst barriers, headwinds, and challenges, I think there's reason to be optimistic, and I think there's a number of competitive advantages. The first, and I think foremost, is tradition. Okay, we have been in our homes for a long period of time. We're not, out with family and friends or visiting as much as possible. There is no other time during the shopping season that people sort of revert back to memories, revert back to that feeling that the holiday shopping season gives them, that reason for optimism. And so, if any place in our community does that, it's downtown. It's not in an e-commerce site or anything like that. And so I think that's our number one competitive advantage, is giving people that same sense of tradition. People are yearning for normalcy, yearning for how things used to be in many respects. And so if we can do that in some way, I think that bodes well for our independent business owners. Value shopping is also, so there's some, pushback against the nationals, that yearning for local. Anything, I think there's people are looking how to support their small business owners, especially minority business owners, or people that are doing things locally, artisans, crafters, makers. Most of the data is showing there's also big interest there from consumers. And then finally, as I mentioned before, sort of that experiential shopping remains quite hot. So anything that you can do to tell a story, let people see what you're doing, engage them in an activity, even if it's like packing something up and letting them take it home and doing it, those are kind of winners going into the holiday shopping season. Next slide. So that concludes my remarks, and probably went a few minutes over. I apologize for that, but would love to answer any questions you might have. And certainly, again, want to thank the Lake Superior Community Partnership and all those involved today for having me on. And thank you, and I wish you all the best of luck going into a holiday shopping season.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. That was a lot of interesting and very useful information for our community. We have received some questions, so we'll jump right into those. But just a reminder that you can still submit the questions through the question pane if you're an attendee. So jumping right in, what are some of the best practices and trends that you are seeing in rural communities?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I showcased is scalable. Okay, 85% of the work that we do at the National Main Street Center, at Michigan Main Street, is with a lot of small communities. And so all the ideas that we pick up, what we try to do is take things that might be at the national or larger scale, and how can they be scalable? So whether it's, you might not have Grubhub, right, in your community, but there's no reason why you can't get a consortium of businesses together to have delivery, or work with your local organizations to do that. Everything around tradition and parades, all these ideas can be done because a lot of the things are scalable in nature. And so I think particularly for rural, what we're seeing overall is that people are having a desire to kind of get away, to explore. And there's a perception in some ways, not always statistically, okay, that rural areas are safer for shopping, etc. And so I think that continues to be a big driver, to get away, to do a staycation, to have tradition. So I think rural communities really embody a lot of that sense, that feeling that the holiday shopping season kind of brings about.
Perfect, thank you. Speaking of the delivery, do you have any ideas or thoughts on how businesses can collaborate with technology and delivery, home delivery?
Yeah. So again, the amount of apps that are out there that serve as platforms, community platforms, and my apologies offhand, names aren't coming to my mind, but I would encourage you to look at sort of the app marketplace, and they're pretty inexpensive, and you can use those platforms then as a way to market to local customers that this is, you're interested in having delivery from, and then you can list your businesses on there from XYZ businesses. Go to this particular app, and you can then schedule time, order, etc. So I think using off-the-shelf products is probably the best way to go. And again, it's probably best to utilize some sort of app or social media, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, is another way to sort of broadcast that if the app market doesn't play well.
And to piggyback on that, Black Friday, it's happening right now in a lot of big box stores. Say that you're a small business and you're a little bit behind on that. How would you suggest promoting Black Friday? Because you can't really get up and going with those apps right now. Would you say that social media is the best way to promote those, or do you have other ideas?
No, I would encourage, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or whatever else you've been engaging with your customers on during this particular time, is probably the best way. And that's the nice thing is you can hold very sort of unique events on those platforms. You can showcase your products in a live stream, or in a recorded stream. So I think there's a lot of flexibility with those particular products. And I think at this particular this stage at where we're at November 10th, it's probably best to use what you're most familiar with, what you've already engaged with, rather than try to make really a lot of wholesale changes at this time. It's probably not the best use, because time is limited. So I would go with what you know and what's worked and stick with that.
Perfect, thank you. So the big burning question is, how do small businesses with Amazon?
I'm sorry, it cut out just a little bit. Can you repeat that?
Oh, sorry. Yep. How do small businesses compete against Amazon during all of this?
Yeah. So I wouldn't look at it as that you're competing against Amazon. It's not sort of a correlation. I think that you make, much like in the 80s and 90s, you don't compete with Walmart. They have what they do. It's very volume. It's price. It's sort of generic in many respects. And I think what you're not selling that. You're not competing against that. That's kind of to my mind, a little bit of a losing proposition. What you're selling is value add, tradition, uniqueness, values, in terms of supporting local experience, creativity. it's sort of an apples and orange. They've got their thing, you got your thing. Now, you still need folks like either Amazon or other platforms or your own sort of e-commerce platform. I don't want to say that it's e-commerce versus bricks and mortar. I think that's not it. It's bricks and mortar and e-commerce. But in terms of what we do in downtowns and what small businesses, I think you're offering something that's just really tangibly totally different. But I think how you market that to consumers also has to be different, giving them something that speaks to their lifestyle, that allows them to tell a story, that gives them a good feeling from supporting you and local vendors, that speaks to tradition. And so I think it's just a totally different kind of way of marketing, presenting differences versus price and convenience.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I enjoy shopping in stores and, everybody shops on Amazon, but it's completely different shopping.
Exactly. Yep.
One question that came in, is there a place where small businesses can find the statistics that you shared with us today for the future? A good source that you might suggest businesses keep an eye out throughout the year, even in non-COVID times?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, there's no simple answer to that. I mean, everything you saw was pulled from just a ton of different things. So what I would actually probably encourage now, things like National Federation of Independent Businesses will sometimes put out different statistics. So like if you're interested in like Small Business Saturday, and what's happening with Small Business Saturday and some of the statistics that come from the surveys of those going through Small Business Saturday, they work with American Express on doing that. If you're interested in e-commerce, Adobe actually puts out a lot of statistics on a range of data for e-commerce, and how consumers are doing with e-commerce shopping. But a lot of it, frankly, is just looking at news, national news. Small business is so hot right now from a media perspective. There's just a lot of data, and what I would also encourage, depending on what sector you're in, look at your national associations. They often will also be in sort of agglomerators of data around your particular sector, whether you're in furniture, recreation, whatever. There's just a host of industry sites and associations that produce that kind of data. So that's probably another area to really follow that gives you more detailed data for your particular sector. And then I use Twitter a lot, and I follow things that give me some sort of retail perspective, national and bite size. And then if something I want to go deeper in, then I can take a look at the statistics a little bit more. But unfortunately, there's just not like one national agglomerator for this kind of data.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we are getting close to the end here, and in case anyone missed it, this is in the beginning of the webinar. We shared that we are going to be doing a networking element to the webinar event. We emailed the link prior to the webinar, and it is also in the chat box for you to join us for some post-event networking. If you have any questions or need help, you can email Megan in our office at megan@marquette.org. Matt, thank you very much for all the information that you shared with us today, and thank you everyone for attending. If you have any questions, please contact the Lake Superior Community Partnership. You will also receive a follow-up email with the presentation slides and a link to viewing the recording of today's webinar. On behalf of the LSCP, Marquette DDA, GINCC, Negaunee DDA, and Ishpeming DDA, we thank you for joining us today and hope that you'll all be able to join us. But if not, we hope you have a good rest of the afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so much.